So hi again, and I've decided to actually do a little recording in my car. Now, obviously, there are thousands of tips that one comes across over time that are relevant and that I could pass on. And just suffice to say that I'll just pass on another tip to you. And this one has got to do with driving to your destination and your preparation. Now, for photography, if you're driving to your destination, then your preparation should be that you should think about all sorts of weather conditions and troubles that you might come across and that you might have to think about. And also your normal standard way of thinking about how to basically address certain circumstances that you might come across. So, as a tip, I just want to give you an understanding that if you are leaving early in the morning to do wildlife photography, and the obvious thought about that is then, what do I wear in the morning and how cold is it going to be? And you might not have any other considerations. However, down the track you might want to think about whether or not there is other issues, such as the problem about the change of the day. So in the morning it will be very cold, perhaps in your country, and come around 10 o'clock or so, all of a sudden the heat wave is going to come in and it will be exclusively hot. Now, that is not a huge problem as long as you are prepared for that. And as a safety guide, I've basically got a fair few things in my car, and that is my tip. Just make sure and give yourself allowances for what is to come during the day. For starters, make sure that you have got enough water, adequate amount of water that can stay cool. I mean, water that gets hot during the day is no good for you. So you want to have adequate cool water. Then make sure there is food, or perhaps you're just thinking about purchasing food on the way, but always make sure that you've got something that might get you through at least 24 hours. Then there is the other point of where you may have to think about your attire and your clothing. Now, what I do is I like to dress accordingly and be warm all the time, so that way I don't have to stop my photography anytime soon. I can just keep going through the day and there's no problem. The way to do this is layering, and I usually have got thin layers of insulation material, and that kind of material is like what you would find in hiking or mountain climbing sort of shops, like long johns and, you know, long underwear basically, and long sleeve, you know, underwear. Instead of having to carry long large jumpers and all that sort of stuff, for most countries that is adequate enough. Obviously then you are thinking about going hiking with your camera gear and all that. Make sure that you only carry what you absolutely need. But don't forget your first aid kit. That is a really important part of what you are doing. First aid kit should always be in your bag. Same as water should always be in your bag as well. So that is my next tip. Just to make sure that you are under control and you are not going to panic during your shoot where you may or may not have the right gear with you, the right stuff. You don't want to end up screwing yourself over and just doing the wrong thing. Also, make sure that you've got maps with you, and even if you're going further inland, make sure you've got a compass with you. Make sure that people know where you're going and what you're doing, as much as it, might not sink into a lot of people's brains. But if you go missing, you want to have some sort of assurance that people will start looking for you when you don't return home. Also, if you go off the beaten path, then just make sure that you know your way back and make sure that you don't get lost. Australia is a very vast land, and time and time again people get lost in this country, and maybe not as fault of their own directly, but more so indirectly, where they just happen to have one thing failing, or they just think that they can just use their mobile phone, and all of a sudden they don't have any connection at all on their phone, and then that becomes useless. So these are the little bits and pieces that you need to think about. The more wild you go, the more further out you go, and the more off the beaten track you go, the more you have to basically have assurances that you will actually find a way back, have enough drink, have enough water, and enough food with you to get you through whatever you may come across. These are all considerations that you need to think about, and really take control of it. Take control of your own way of getting back home. Think about the worst case scenario without being falsely alarmed. You don't want to get to the point where you are so worried about these things that you don't leave your house anymore. Obviously you do go out and you do enjoy the outdoors. Also, there are other considerations like insects, and the best way to repel that is basically have insect repellent, insect spray, etc. And the other thing is the sun. You want to have adequate sun cover and sun protection, so make sure you've got a good 50 plus sun cream with you all the time. These things are just minor incidences that you should have with you, and to be able to control all that. Now, if you're further going out back, etc., then obviously there won't be any manatees around, and there won't be any toads around, so you need to have bits and pieces with you that qualify you to be able to clean yourself, etc. So those are the most important tips that you really need to adhere to, and it makes sense for a lot of people. For a lot of people it doesn't make sense, thus they get lost and never come back home. So unfortunately these things have to be thought about, and we need to take care of that. Everyone makes it home safely with tons of photos. Make sure you come home with tons of photos, and you are basically feeling the same way as when you left. So you're not dehydrated, you're not hungry, you shouldn't be any of those things, and then you've done the job right. So until I catch up with another tip, take care, and we'll see you all later. Bye.